Charles Darwin shook society to its foundations when he published his book Origin of Species in 1859. His theory of evolution by natural selection overturned centuries of long-held beliefs and forced us to reevaluate our place in the universe. In the years since the book's publication, both Darwin and his writings have become standard wisdom, both in the scientific community and the world at large. In some circles, however, Darwin provokes not admiration, but outrage. His books have been burned and his legacy challenged by angry religious fundamentalists. Some even claim that evolution is unscientific, a cruel hoax designed to discredit the Bible and Christianity. But are these fears justified? Does evolution disprove God? Or is it possible that evolution is one of God's greatest creations? To explore this issue, let's begin by asking a very basic question. What is evolution? In common use, the term can refer to one of two distinct ideas. The first is the belief that life on Earth has developed over billions of years, across species lines, and guided, at least in part, by natural selection. This first use of the term evolution is not a matter of opinion, it's settled fact. It's supported by converging lines of evidence across multiple branches of science, from anatomy to zoology. Look back far enough in your own lineage, and you will find not only primates, but reptiles, birds, fish, and single-celled organisms, stretching back to before the age of the dinosaurs. Not everyone accepts this, of course. When confronted by the evidence, some people simply shrug their shoulders and say, well, evolution is just a theory. Technically, these people are correct. But in the world of science, not all theories are created equal. For example, Einstein's ideas about gravity and the speed of light are still referred to as the theory of relativity. But that doesn't make them any less true. We know that Einstein was right because we've been testing his ideas for 100 years, and every result has matched his predictions. We know that evolution is true for the same reasons. We see evidence for it in the anatomical similarities between humans and animals, in the presence of vestigial organs such as the appendix, and in the behavioral traits shared by widely diverging species. We see it at work on the micro scale in the laboratory, and on the macro scale in the fossil record. Everything we see in the world around us is consistent with Darwin's theory. Now, this doesn't mean that science has solved every problem posed by evolution. Scientists are divided over whether natural selection is the main star in the evolutionary process or simply a supporting actor. They also debate whether evolution is geared towards individual survival or species selection, whether it's gradual or punctuated, convergent or non-convergent. But none of these controversies imply that the theory of evolution itself is in trouble. On the contrary, the question of whether or not life evolves is beyond debate. In this understanding of the term evolution, the jury is in and the verdict has been rendered. Darwin was right. There is a second sense in which some people use the term evolution, however. To them, Darwinism is more than a successful scientific theory. It's a weapon for them to use in their war against religion. These people are the atheistic equivalent of Christian fundamentalists. Not only do they criticize those who deny evolution, they also attack scientists and philosophers who disagree with their particular interpretation of Darwin's theory. Richard Dawkins, for example, spent years waging a war of words against paleontologist and fellow evolutionist Stephen Jay Gould. Dawkins believed that Gould was betraying Darwin's ideas by claiming that factors other than natural selection play a major role in the evolutionary process. Dawkins also disliked the fact that Gould was willing to tolerate people of faith and unwilling to join Dawkins in his anti-religious crusade. Atheist philosopher Daniel Dennett is another example of anti-religious fundamentalism. Dennett believes that Darwin's theories explain not only biology, but the way the entire universe works. Like Dawkins, Dennett disdains his fellow evolutionists who dispute his radical conclusions. For Dawkins, Dennett, and other militant atheists, it's not enough to just accept evolution. You also have to accept their version of the theory and the implications they say it entails. Otherwise, you're compromising with the enemy. One person who can identify with Dawkins and Dennett is Ken Ham, a self-proclaimed creation scientist who believes that the Bible is an infallible guide to matters of history and science. According to Ham, God created the universe in 7 days, dinosaurs walked side by side with early humans, and Adam and Eve ruined things for the rest of us by eating a piece of forbidden fruit. Ham and his fellow Christian fundamentalists not only sentence people like Dawkins and Dennett to hell, they also question the integrity of Christians who disagree with their own ultra-literal views. For Ham and for other fundamentalists, any view of the Bible other than theirs is an ungodly compromise with unbelievers. Looking at these two groups of extremists, it's obvious that both of them have more in common than either is willing to admit. Dawkins, Dennett, and Ham may espouse different creeds, but their mindset is the same. Each believes that he is defending sacred truth against the dangers of heresy. Each spends his days playing off the other's extremes and making a tidy living in the process. According to both groups, there are only two options available to us. Either believe that the Bible is literally true, or deny religion altogether and embrace atheism. The question is whether or not they're right. Must we choose between God and evolution? Not according to Francis Collins, who is himself a noted scientist and a committed Christian. Collins is the geneticist who headed the Human Genome Project, which unraveled the secrets of human DNA back in 2003. He is a member of the American Academy of Sciences and the Institute of Medicine. Unlike Ken Ham and other biblical literalists, Collins sees no conflict whatsoever between evolution and his religious faith. He is the founder of an organization called BioLogos, which promotes active dialogue between evolutionary scientists, biblical scholars, and theologians. Collins is not the only scientist who shares these type of convictions. Other examples include John Polkinghorne, V.V. Raman, Alan Sandage, Kenneth Miller, and my personal favorite, Clyde Tombaugh, the scientist who discovered Pluto in 1930. Surveys of the scientific community show that approximately 50% of professional scientists believe either in God or in some type of higher power. Many theologians share the belief that evolution and religion can exist in harmony. C.S. Lewis, for one, was an enthusiastic proponent of this view, as are most scholars and professors of religion in both Catholic and mainstream Protestant circles. Of course, none of this stops the fundamentalists on both sides of the issue from peddling hatred and mistrust. As for the rest of us, however, we've long since figured out how to get along. Those who still insist on finding conflict between science and religion sometimes draw a distinction between faith and reason. According to these people, religion is based entirely on faith and is unconcerned with evidence and logic, whereas science is based on skepticism and concerns itself only with facts. The two endeavors are therefore destined to do endless battle until one destroys the other. But those who make this claim reveal nothing but their own ignorance in doing so. To see this, we need look no further back in history than the writings of church fathers such as Augustine and Aquinas. Both of them used logic and reason as a matter of course in developing their theological views. This same commitment to careful thinking distinguishes the writings of other faith traditions, including representatives of the Jewish, Islamic, Hindu, Buddhist, and Taoist traditions. It's true that belief in God, or any other proposition for that matter, rests on a foundation of unprovable assumptions, but the same is true of science itself. In fact, scientists make multiple assumptions in the course of doing their work. They assume that the universe operates according to consistent natural laws, that mathematics describes reality. that samples taken of a certain set can approximate the entire set, and that our physical senses are telling us the truth about the external world. This last assumption is familiar to fans of the Matrix film series, but the concept behind it predates Keanu Reeves by over 5,000 years. Everything we know about the world around us is based on what we see, hear, touch, taste, and smell. But it's impossible for us to look past our five senses and confirm that they're telling us the truth. This dilemma is especially troubling for those who believe in the multiverse, given that an infinite number of advanced civilizations with enough computing power will ultimately develop an infinite number of fake universes populated by fake people who think they're real. In fact, given the assumptions of the multiverse theory, fake universes should outnumber real ones by a factor of trillions. Of course, none of us live our lives based on this premise. We believe that we are living in a real world because otherwise we would never get out of bed. But our only reason for believing the world is real is the input we get from our physical senses, which may or may not be an illusion. The takeaway from this philosophical detour is that faith and reason are not mutually exclusive. We use both of them every day to navigate our way through the world. We have no other choice. At the same time, none of us assumes that any old leap of faith is good enough. We demand a rational basis for our beliefs, and rightly so. That's why we're willing to get on an airplane even if we don't believe in UFOs. We know the airplane might crash, but we also know that the odds of it landing are greater. So we put our faith in the pilot and the airplane manufacturer and get on board. In other words, we make a rational leap of faith. And it's that same type of interplay between faith and reason which brings us back to evolution and what it offers the world of religion. So what does evolution bring to religion's table? For one thing, it reaffirms the fact that natural law governs the universe, in this case, the law of natural selection. Yet at the same time, we know that evolution is energized by spontaneous variations in the genetic code. We call them mutations. We owe our existence to this system that combines random fortune with ironclad rules. Seen from this perspective, evolution, far from being the enemy of religion, reinforces our conviction that the world and our lives are more than a mere accident. It does this without locking us into the straitjacket of determinism. If, as evolutionary science teaches, humanity in its current form was not inevitable, if things might have turned out differently, then freedom is preserved and the future is open. Evolution's contributions to religion go beyond mere theology. Modern science also offers insights for biblical studies by settling forever the question of whether the Genesis creation account is literal fact or sacred mythology. We know from our studies of the natural world that the story of Adam and Eve, the serpent in the garden, and the fall of humanity is like any other example of great storytelling. It never lets facts get in the way of truth. And the fact is that all of us, like Adam, have tasted the forbidden fruit from time to time, whether it takes the form of unbridled sensuality, the lust for earthly gain, or the urge to marginalize others. As a result, we not only bring suffering on ourselves, we also inflict it on those around us. But in making our mistakes, we learn the consequences of our choices, an essential step in the evolution of our moral character. We stumble, we fall, we pick ourselves up, and we keep going, sadder but wiser for the experience. This ongoing transition between harmless innocence and empowered virtue is what the story of Adam and Eve is all about. As a historical account, the book of Genesis is an absolute failure. As a commentary on the human condition, it's a work of profound literary and spiritual significance. The role of the serpent in the story of Adam and Eve also reveals the true motives of the extremist on both sides of the creation versus evolution argument. The temptation to pat ourselves on the back while looking down on others is an ever-present peril. As long as humanity exists, there will be those who goad us into fighting among ourselves while they sit back and reap the profits. It's impossible to discuss the topic of evolution without also touching on the problem of evil. Why would a benevolent God choose a process as cold and cruel as evolution to guide the development of life on Earth? The answer is that God wants humanity to be free. But freedom can never flourish in a universe squelched of novelty by determinism. God has given us a world that is lawful enough to ensure order, yet disordered enough to foster free will. The risks we face from day to day are the price we pay for our liberty. They are both our blessing and our curse. Otherwise, we would be like the children of overprotective, over-controlling parents. Every aspect of our lives would be planned out in advance, whether we liked it or not. We would never miss a meal or end up in jail, but we would also never know freedom. This raises the question of whether our freedom is worth the price we pay for it. Does the ability to make morally relevant choices justify the suffering we see every day? That is one of the most compelling and most unsettling questions that human beings have ever posed. It's also a question which God has never seen fit to answer. That might be because God either doesn't exist or doesn't care. If that's the case, then you might as well stop watching this video right now and make the most of today, because tomorrow you'll die. There is another possibility, however. Perhaps God doesn't answer this question because it's not his question to answer. It's ours. As technologically advanced creatures with immense power at our fingertips, the onus for redeeming creation is upon us. Not by perpetuating our petty squabbles, but by making this world a better place in which to live. Only in that way can we finally say, yes, it was worth it after all. In the closing words of one of his books, Charles Darwin writes, "We must acknowledge, as it seems to me, that man, with all of his noble qualities, with his sympathy, his benevolence, with his godlike intellect and all of his exalted powers, still bears in his body the indelible stamp of his lowly origin." Darwin's simple observation sums up our common dilemma with indisputable elegance. All of us bear the scars of our evolutionary past. Even the best of us is quick to react and slow to think, eager to hate and reluctant to forgive, anxious to see others through the lens of prejudice, and prone to cowering in terror at the darkness that lies beyond the limits of our knowledge. Science is one of the means by which we push back the borders of that darkness. In that sense, the scientific quest is also a sacred quest. It's the quest that inspired Charles Darwin to uncover the truth of evolution. It continues to inspire curious minds to this day. The question for us is how we will use the awesome abilities that science has bequeathed to us. We will either ascend to a more evolved sensibility, or we will descend back into the savage darkness from which we came. The path we ultimately take will determine our destiny, both in this world and the world to come. I, for one, believe that our species will ultimately listen to the better angels of our natures. On the day that happens, Charles Darwin will stand out as a man who used his God-given gifts for the noblest cause to which any of us can aspire. I can only hope that all of us do the same during the limited time we have on this earth.